A few years ago, I got it in my head that I wanted to write an instrumental Irish jig on the ukulele. It was around the beginning of March, and I just was in the mood to write an Irish jig. So I grabbed the uke and started experimenting, and eventually came up with this tune that I'm about to play for you. Unfortunately for me, it didn't turn out to be very Irish. So that's why I call it my Wannabe Irish Jig. Now, it's supposed to be played at a quick tempo, but I want to spend a few minutes here before I play it to explain some of the techniques that I'm using so as to remove a little bit of the mystery around this fast lick. So if you don't want to hear this explanation, you can skip ahead to the timestamp you see on the screen right now. Okay, so there's three main techniques that I use in my Wannabe Irish Jig. The first technique is called a hammer-on. That's where you pick a string and then hammer on with your left hand, assuming you're right-handed, to create a second note. It sounds something like this. So I'm picking the open string and then hammering on a second note. So I get two notes for the price of one pick. You could also start anywhere on the neck you want, say up there. So that's technique number one. Technique number two is the exact reverse of a hammer-on, which is called a pull-off. That's where you already have it fretted somewhere. You pick it, and then you pull off to create the second note. Sounds like this. And you could do that elsewhere on the neck as well. Okay, so that's a pull-off. The third technique that I'm going to use is a slide, and that's where you pick a note fretted somewhere, and then you slide it up the neck. This is up the neck. That's down. So you slide it up the neck to create the second note. It sounds something like this. So that would be a slide up, and that would be a slide down. In all three of those techniques, I'm getting two notes, but only picking the string once. And that's beneficial when you're playing a fast lick because, otherwise you'd have to pick every individual note, and sometimes it's just not feasible. So on the right hand, I'm also doing a picking pattern, so I want to explain what I'm doing there. Now, I use a low G string on my uke, and I use that mostly because if I ever do a lead lick or a scale or something, I don't want it to jump octaves, which is what would happen if you were to use a high fourth string. So I use a low G string, and I treat that as a bass note in this picking pattern. And I also treat the third string, the C string, as a bass note too, even though it's not very bassy. So the picking pattern goes like this. I'll hit a bass note, and then a down up on 2 or 3 strings. And then I'll hit another bass note, and then another down up. So it goes bass note, down, up, bass note, down, up, bass note, down, up, bass note, down, up. And you can do that with any chord you'd like. Here's what it sounds like on the C chord. Okay. All right. Lastly, before I play the jig for you, this is a chord progression in a 1-4-5 pattern. So my 1 chord is a C chord, so that's called the tonic. The 4 chord, C, D, E, F, is the F chord. So that's my 4 chord or subdominant chord. And then the 5 chord is going to be a G, although I usually play the G7 for my dominant chord. So I'm going to play the pattern through slowly for you so that you can pick out the 3 techniques that I mentioned. And then I'm going to gradually build up the speed as I play through the patterns. The second to last pattern will be about the tempo that I meant it to be played at. And then the last time I'm going to push myself to play it as fast as my hands will allow. So, without further ado, this is my Wannabe Irish Jig. So there it is. There's my Wannabe Irish Jig. It's a fun song to play, and I had fun practicing it over the last few years to get it up to that speed. If there's anything that you should take away from this, it's the following. If you want to play a fast song like that, you have to practice it slow. Playing it slow and practicing it slow builds the fundamentals that allow you to play it fast. I never practiced this song fast for the sake of playing it fast. I only played it fast because I had built the fundamentals playing it slow enough so that the speed just naturally came about, okay? So the more comfortable that I became playing that lick, the faster I could play it. And so that's what led me to be able to play it at that quick tempo, which is fun to do. So happy uking.